Hi there, my name is Chris from Bluerhino Safaris. Today I want to discuss the tyre pressure with you on a 4x4 vehicle or a 4x2 vehicle or any vehicle that you drive that you need better traction on. If you look at the TV programs and you listen to the instructors on 4x4 channels, they'll always tell you to deflate your tyres. And if I ask people why do you deflate tyres, they normally say, well, your tyre gets wider, you have better traction. And that is not accurate. Tyres don't get wider. The tread that touches the soil remains fairly constant. What does change is the length of the track, and I'm going to demonstrate that for you today. So why do we want to change the tyre pressures? Why is tyre pressure so important? I sit with this massive 3-ton beast with a big engine and lots of power, and I'm standing on Mother Earth. And the connection between this vehicle and Mother Earth is this little pad right here at the bottom. That is the only connection point that my vehicle has with the earth. Now, if I can get that connection point as good as possible, then I'm going to have good traction, which means I'm going to go where I want to go and I'm not going to get stuck. So there's two reasons why you would do it. One is for flotation. It means to keep you up on top of the sand or the mud. So you want a nice wide footprint to distribute the forces. And the second thing is to give you multiple points of contact where the tyre can grip and you can move forward. To demonstrate this, I'm going to use what's called a speedy deflator. A speedy deflator is not something that I like to use, mainly because I have to screw it onto the valve, and I also have to unscrew the valve from inside, the valve stem. And that to me creates too many points of risk. When I can have a damaged tyre, I'm sitting in the middle of nowhere and I unscrew the valve and the valve breaks. Then I have a serious problem. So I prefer a matchstick, but for this exercise it's just going to be a lot quicker if I use a speedy deflator. We are going to start at 2.5 bar and we're going to drop the vehicle down to 0.5 bar, and we will measure every 0.1 bar increment. We will measure the tyre. The BF Goodridges are all-terrains. It's the standard tyre that I use for my safaris, and it's on the Land Cruiser 78 series troop carrier. As I say, it's about 3 tons. And I'm starting on the back wheel, and I'll also show you the results on the front wheel and we can compare. The wheel is a little bit knobbly, so getting the rulers in, getting the square in might just be a little bit of a problem. But bear with me, we're going to get some results that might interest you. So as I said already, the profile of the tyre is from your rim down to the ground. That is the profile. So if I talk about what is the height of the profile, what is your profile measurement, I'm referring to from the rim down to the ground. That is the profile of the tyre. Further, to do the tests, the vehicle is in the air just to make it a little bit easier for me. I've got it on my lift. The post on this corner of the vehicle is not touching, so the weight of the vehicle is on this wheel, and I will make sure that it doesn't touch, just in case you say, well, you're sitting on the post and your readings are inaccurate. This wheel is standing on a solid piece of wood with solid 3 layers of plywood and a piece of paper that I will be using to do my measurements on. So the pillar is not supporting the vehicle, the support is only the wheel. And that goes for the front when I do the front as well. I'll make sure that the wheel carries all the weight. Alright, so there you have it. I'm down to 0.5 bar in the back. You can see the profile is very low, the tire is very flat. I wouldn't drive it like this. It will generate a lot of heat and you will lose the tire. But if I was stuck in sand, I wouldn't mind having this. If I'm alone and I'm stuck in sand, I've done it before, I deflate my tires to 0, drive out, crawl out very slowly, and then inflate my tires to more appropriate pressure. So let's take the paper and then analyze the data that we received. Right, so here you can see the two pieces of paper that I used, the front and at the top and the rear at the bottom. And you can see there's a clear difference between the two of them. So let's start with the front. 204 millimeters when we had the 2.5 bar pressure, and when we dropped it down to 0.5, it went up to 303 millimeters. Then on the rear we have 259 at 2.5 bar, and at the rear it dropped down to 400, or increased to 420 millimeters. So you can see there's a big difference between the front and the back, and also between 2.5 and 0.5 bar. The difference between front and back is basically the weight of the vehicle. The front carries a lot less weight, the rear is a lot heavier, and therefore you are stuck with this funny discrepancy. And that means your tire pressure will be different if you want to have the same footprint between the front and the back. So this is just the illustration of the actual increase in footprint size. On the front we had a 49% increase from 2.5 to 0.5, and on the rear we had a 62% increase from 2.5 to 0.5 bar. This is the graphic depiction of the track length versus the profile height that we just established. And the purpose of this graph is just to show you that the deflation at the bottom, where you can see the pressures dropping from 2.5 to 0.5, the deflation did not result in a linear increase in track length. Your biggest changes happens at the lower pressures, which means if you deflate from 2.5 to 2.1, there's not much of a change in your track length. If you look at the yellow line at the top, or the blue line, the two top lines, the track lengths, you can see nothing really happens until you get to 1.9, somewhere there, and then the big changes really starts happening around about 1.2 bar, going down to 0.5. There's big differences, and what this tells you is the difference between 0.9 and 1, or the difference between 1 and 0.8 is a lot bigger in track length than you find at high pressures. So if you have a 0.4 bar increase in pressure due to temperature, you can go profile length, you can lose 10% of not profile, your track length, you can lose 10% of your track just by the increase in temperature, which gives you an increase in pressure. So important thing of this graph is the lower your pressures, the bigger the changes. So let's look at the graph with the raw data. Let's say my vehicle has a standard pressure of 2.1 in the front and 2.5 in the back. That will give me a tread length, as you can see there, 213 in the front and 259 in the back on my current loads. Now if I follow the standard instructions and I deflate my tires to 1.6 bar front and back, it will give me 229 in the front, which gives me a 16 millimeter increase, 7.5%, and it will give me 153 in the back, 291 in the back, 32 millimeter increase and a 12% increase. So what it shows you is that the difference in percentage between front and back is different if I only did 1.6 bar front and back. So what it tells me is I need to make a difference in what I do in the front versus what I do in the back. To achieve the same 12% in the front, I would need to drop my pressure down to 1.4 bar, which will give me a 238 millimeter front tread length, and that will give me a 25mm increase, which is equivalent to 12%. Therefore I then have the same 12% increase front and back. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at this would be to say I would like the same tread length on the front and the back. Now if I have the same tread length, let's say 283mm for example on the front, gives me a 152 profile. 282 gives me a 155 profile on the back. If I want the same tread length, then I will have the same footprint on the front and the back, and the wheels will look the same. So it makes it a little bit easier to deflate, because I deflate both tires to the same visual look, and that is very different than pressure. Alright, so let's take this out to a practical level. If I'm driving out in the veld and I find an obstacle in front of me, whether it be snow or mud or rocks or sand, I need to decide what I want to do with my tires. Do I leave them as hard as they were when they were on the tar road, or do I deflate them to get better traction or a smoother ride, or whatever the case may be? So I need to make a decision, and for that I need to look ahead and see what is in front of me. Now let's say we have some deep sand, and I need to deflate my tires for deep sand. On this vehicle with this configuration, remember the weight of the vehicle will change everything on a tire, but on this configuration I need to deflate the front down to 0.9 bar, for example. On this vehicle, the front, I know if it's at 0.9, I'm happy with that. I will then check the profile height on the tire, and I will just transfer that profile height to the back. It means I don't really need a pressure gauge. All I need is a little stick that I've pre-cut that shows me exactly what the height is of the tire. So let me go ahead and show you what I would do. I'm arriving at deep sand. I see it's quite deep. I need to deflate to 0.9 in the front, my trusty settings. So the first thing I'm going to do, the front, there's never a difference in the load on the vehicle on the front, it's always the same. So I'm going to start with the front and deflate to 0.9. There we go, the front is down to 0.9, and this I know normally works for me in sand. So the next thing I do is I cut a little twig from the side of the road, and I cut the profile height of this tire. Remember, the profile height is the height from the rim to the ground, so you need something to give you an indication of that. It gets a little bit difficult if you do it in the veld, but you will quickly get the drift of how it's done. Once I've got my profile height, I know 0.9 profile height, 0.9 bar pressure on the tire will give me a certain profile height, and if I have that profile height, I have a certain footprint length. And if I have that, I want the same on the back. Right, so here you can see that the rim is too high, which means I need to deflate the back to get it the same as the front. And that would be it. My front profile is the same as the back profile, which means my front tread is the same as the back tread. And I know when I drive in sand that this configuration works. Notice I didn't need to look at the pressure. Pressure is not that important. What I do next is I go out and use the vehicle in the sand. If I'm struggling a little bit, you just deflate a little bit more, and you get a bigger footprint. So it's as easy as that. So let's refer back to our table and have a look at what we just did. On the front we deflated to 0.9 bar, which gives us about 157, 158 profile height. We went ahead and we copied that onto the back wheel, and we expect a track length of the same, profile height of the same, but now the pressure is about 1.9 bar. What this tells me is that my vehicle is quite heavy in the back and I need quite a bit of pressure to retain the profile that I'm looking for. One of the reasons I would want that profile is just if I hit a pothole or a tree root, that I don't damage my tire. So I don't want it to be too low, just in case I hit something bad in the road, a rock or a tree stump or something that's hidden under the water or in the sand. Now, what this also shows me is that I have on this vehicle with this configuration, I have a red line at the bottom for normal driving conditions, which is 0.8 bar on the front and 1.2 bar in the back. Now it means that if I'm struggling in sand, the front I can drop a little bit more, but on the back I can actually drop it quite a bit more, but then I have to start looking out for high pressures on my tires. High temperatures on my tires. And high temperatures will be because of the buildup of friction because of the low pressure and the low profile of the tire. So it flexes a lot, it generates a lot of heat, and therefore your temperature goes up. So I know that if I drop below the 1 point or this profile, I have to start looking out for high temperature issues, and my speed is very important. So I have to go slow. But when I'm back into sandy conditions that's more acceptable, I can always just inflate back to 1.9, giving me the same profile as the 0.9 in front, and I can comfortably travel around without worrying too much about temperature. So this is a little bit of playroom at the bottom, below the 1.9 bar down to 1.2 that I have on the back. So if I'm struggling, I can drop it. On the front, I don't have too much wiggle room. I can go down a little bit. If I'm stuck, this graph goes out of the window and I can deflate both sides to 0.5 and get the maximum track length that I can. Remember, when you are that low on pressure, you have to be careful not to turn very sharply because you can push the front tire off the rim. So try to go straight, and once you are out of trouble and back to normal conditions, just give it a little bit air in front to lift the pressure back up to your 0.9 and the rear back up to 1.9. Well, that is it. It's fairly straightforward, fairly simple to deflate your tires. The main purpose of this video was to show you how I approach it, how I think about it, and also to show you that the front and the back is not the same. So if you heard that someone said 1.6 bar in the sand is a good thing, I've just showed you that there is a big difference between the front and the back, and that you should consider them separately. Also, the tire pressure that is ideal for your vehicle would differ based on the loads on your vehicle, as well as the type of tire and the size of tire that you have. For example, a tractor tire, the back one, if it's pumped really hard, it's at about 0.6, 0.7 bar. So the pure size of the tire changes the characteristics of the pressure that is required in the tire. So keep that in mind when you deflate your tires, and go out there and have a look. Just be aware that you need to change the tire pressures when you're going into off-road conditions, and also that your vehicle is unique to other vehicles with your configuration, and maybe it takes a little bit of effort just to establish exactly where you are with your tire pressures on your specific vehicle. Safe travels, and I hope to see you soon on one of my safaris. Cheers.